Alright guys, welcome back. Over the last few weeks we've been talking about the rod series and the rod series that I have with Duckett Fishing. It's my signature series, and you know, you see me use these rods over the last few years, but finally going down and going into talking about the individual actions and why I designed each rod. And because I know so many have asked, what are you using this rod for, that rod? This is not necessarily has to work, or it's not necessarily the actions that you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm using this rod action and I work. It's not the Wheeler guidelines. I mean, it is the Wheeler guidelines. It's basically what I use and what's worked for me. You can ultimately use whatever you want to, and if it works for you, ultimately, that's what you need to do. So diving into the rod series, this is my 7.2 medium heavy casting rod. Now there's two 7.2 medium heavy action rods in my series. One is a graphite composite, and that is my crankbait rod. That is my shallow water crankbait rod. This rod is completely different. And this is sort of my all around swim. This is really my swim jig rod, okay? And a swim jig is an underutilized technique. You see DC use it a lot. It catches a lot of big fish all over the country. It's also a really good, you know, light pitching. If you like, this is one of the only rods in my series that I have a fast tip to because it's technique specific. And what I mean by that is when I designed this rod, I have the Keegan guides on it as well. And the thing was about when I designed this rod is I wanted that faster tip. It has, and it's gonna be harder to see it right here, but this rod has a lot faster tip than a lot of my rods. There is a parabolic action towards the end, but it has that fast action tip. Because what I'm doing with this, and the whole reason behind it, is when I pick that swim jig up and I cast it out there and I'm doing that Alabama shake and I'm shaking that rod and that fish bites it, that rod will load up, that little tip, that rod will load up, catch them. And I want a lot of backbone to it, but I don't, that first little bit is a huge deal to me. And I've used a lot of different rods, but a fast action rod on a swim jig is what I recommend. That 7.2, 7.3 is really the perfect length for me to be able to skip it, but still be able to make long casts on flats with grass flats, or if I'm just reeling it. And the other thing is I don't always throw a swim jig where I'm pumping it. That Alabama shake, that's normally something when I'm keeping that swim jig up in the water column. When I'm fishing it offshore in grass, same thing. If I'm throwing this in my fluorocarbon rod with 12 or 14 pound fluorocarbon, I will slowly wind that thing and pop it through that grass and wind it, and I will switch it over to a fluorocarbon. Same thing, that action of that rod loads up. This, I do most of the time use fluorocarbon or use braid on this rod when I'm swim jigging, especially in heavy cover. But that is the big thing. As far as Keegan guides, Keegan guides are a great guide. I do have a split grip on this guy, EVA foam, and I normally pair it up with my Paradigm Duckett casting reel, is what I use. So now you can use a lot of different things. This is also a great light flipping rod. This is also a rod that I will use if I'm throwing 1.5 ounce spinnerbait sometimes, if I want to go offshore and throw a bigger spinnerbait. And even I will throw this rod for my scrounger type baits offshore up to 3/4 ounce. I don't go over that. I'll end up bumping it up in action, but it's definitely a rod I'll use on a little bit heavier swim baits, or you know, half ounce scrounger type baits, 3/4, because it has that soft tip, and I do think that works for that application. So hopefully you guys got a little bit of an inside look on and learned a few things about swim jigging, a little bit about why I designed this rod in my series. Drop a comment below. I reread basically every comment, Brody or I. So if there's something that you guys are wanting to know about this rod that I haven't gone through, talked about in this particular video, drop a comment below. I'll try to answer it. Thank you guys so much for watching.